Thank you. So today, to start us off, we have Emily Allen with the County of Santa Barbara here to share some information regarding our coordinated entry system in relation to the Buena Tierra project, permanent supportive housing development that will be coming online later this year. And so we wanted to have the opportunity just to present you all some information regarding, how is it that we prioritize individuals for housing opportunities? What is that process like? Just so you all have that, and then you can ask questions as well. And then I know we have John Polanski on the call, and not to put you on the spot, but just I know we had an initial kind of open date for Buena Tierra, and it got pushed back. If you want to just mention or speak to that.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Well, I guess you're kind of lucky because my camera is not working this morning. So but at least the audio is. Good morning, everyone. John Polanski, Director of Housing Development, Housing Authority of the County of Santa Barbara. And Catherine, you're absolutely right. Buena Tierra, although we've been under construction now for a while, converting the former Super 8, for those that don't know. Yeah, we have run into a few little hiccups, supply chain issues with the switchgear, which is an important component on the electrical side. So we are currently estimating, or at least by the end of the year is what we're saying. We're going to do it as quickly as we can, but having everybody safe when they get in and everything working properly is of utmost importance. So we don't think there'll be any additional hiccups. We think we've identified them all, and we're working our way through them. And like I said, you hear a lot about the supply chain and a lot about different things that they're in short supply. And I have learned a lot more about switch gears in the last couple of projects. We have one in the San Ynez Valley that's undergoing the same issue with the switch gear. So that is pretty much it. And typically, because we want to give our partners plenty of time to work with our prospective residents on getting documents ready and that type of thing, we will start the lease up process. I would guess if we're still the end of the year with the completion date, certainly in the early fall, we'll start assembling the list, working with Emily and the county on the coordinated entry system, and working with all of you. And that's it. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. And yes, I am here, even though you cannot see me.
Thank you. And again, thanks for being here this morning with us. And I'll just pause for a second to see if there's just any general questions regarding the Buena Tierra project. If not,
is the
Judy.
motel then operating still as a motel in most of their rooms?
It is not. We did lease back while we were going through some pre-development efforts that did not involve construction. We did lease it back for a few months because we know it was a really important resource for people experiencing homelessness. The city and SBAC was working with the former owner. But as soon as we started the construction, we really could not have people residing there at the motel. So since I think it was last August, if I'm remembering correctly, we have not had actual residents inside the motel.
Thank you.
Certainly.
And Catherine, can you enable the sharing for my my user that does not have my image?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll do that.
There you go.
Great.
All right. Well, now we will pass it over to Emily Allen.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Allen. I'm a housing program specialist senior with the County of Santa Barbara. One of my main roles is supporting our coordinated entry system. And so I really do like to talk about that and share information about that with people so that you know how to connect people to that system. Just give me one moment. Let's see. Okay, so the coordinated entry system. Today, I just want to cover, just a little bit about what coordinated entry is, the requirements and characteristics of a coordinated entry systems, a little bit of the steps and process, and we also like to talk about the privacy and security, and then we can talk about it in relationship to people in Goleta. So coordinated entry is a process developed to ensure that all people experiencing a housing crisis have fair and equal access and are quickly identified, assessed for, referred, and connected to housing and assistance based on their strengths and needs. And this comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. HUD regulates our coordinated entry system, but now more and more, we're also seeing that state funding requires participation in coordinated entry also. And we have a coordinated entry system. We do this work to assess, people's needs, because we know that living on the streets long-term is deadly. Studies show that chronically homeless people, so people who've been homeless longer and have disabilities, are more vulnerable and 2 to 3 times more likely to succumb to preventable illness than the general population, with a much shorter life expectancy. Our coordinated entry system in Santa Barbara County was fully operational in January of 2018. And, for people who've been involved, and I see some of those people in this room, the roots go back, further than that. Back in 2011, we started doing big point in time counts with more volunteers. We started using a housing needs assessment to understand, who was vulnerable. We started creating what we call a by name list, so that we would know who was experiencing homelessness in our community and what their needs were. But we weren't really fully using the system to make referrals to different resources and, fully compliant until that January 2018. And our mission of coordinated entry is to bring together organizations to create this countywide no wrong door system. So if people, come to a shelter or are connecting with a street outreach worker, that they can go through this coordinated entry process. And we'll talk about other ways that people who aren't yet connected also enter into the coordinated entry system. We have goals around, you sometimes hear the word document ready, but verifying eligibility. So getting people, the different documents that they need commonly for housing, getting all of those documents together so that they can be matched and referred to different housing interventions. And then we also have goals around assigning housing navigators. So people who are prioritized, we know that a lot of times having somebody help, collect those documents is going to be key to them moving forward. So these are just some of the requirements of a coordinated entry system, what we look at all the time to make sure that we're doing coordinated entry in the way we need to. It has to cover the full geographic area of our continuum of care, our COC. And for us, that is Santa Barbara County. So our county is our continuum of care geographically. Some bigger areas, bigger counties like LA, sometimes will have multiple continuums of care. The coordinated entry system has to be non-discriminatory in how people access it, well advertised. There has to be the standardized process and assessment tools that prioritize vulnerability. So again, whether it's happening at street outreach, at a shelter, at one of our access points, there's very much a standardized process for how it happens. There's safety planning, and this is particularly for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. But safety planning also can mean, if somebody's having an immediate mental health or physical health crisis, connecting them to services. There's cultural and linguistic competency, fair and equal access, use of our homeless management information system, HMIS. So this is another HUD requirement that every community have a data system that collects information and does it in a way that protects people's security and privacy. The system has to be inclusive, inform local planning. I often point out to providers when I'm doing training that, when they're using coordinated entry, or our homeless management information system, it's largely to help that person they're working with, but all the data and information also helps, elected officials, policymakers understand what the needs are in our community. We leverage local attributes and capacity. So as our coordinated entry system got started, we relied on existing shelters to be physical access points, street outreach teams to be outreach access points. So we leveraged what we had as we built additional capacity. The system needs to be low barrier, and I'll look at a slide with you all just a little bit on what we mean by low barrier in housing first. There's a trauma-informed care training requirement because we know from looking at our own data, looking at data at a much larger scale, that, while we think of people certainly experiencing homelessness, having mental health issues and needs and substance use issues and needs, that trauma and the impacts and effects of trauma are really, the most prevalent. There's participant autonomy and a person-centered approach. So people are making decisions about, where they want to live, who they want to work with. There are referral protocols. So there are a lot of policies and procedures around how we make referrals. And then there's ongoing planning and stakeholder consultation. So we're regularly making changes to our coordinated entry system through committees, and then making changes at the Continuum of Care Board. So I said we'd take a look at low barrier. I won't read the slide word for word, and I'm happy to share this presentation out with folks, but do just want to really highlight that our coordinated entry system is housing first oriented, so that we're housing people without precondition or service participation requirements. So we're not screening people out for assistance, and we're really, looking to see how we can work with people. And, when we're talking about housing first, we do really believe that people need housing, but housing with supportive services. So, this is where, when we're talking with providers, we say that it's still required that the providers, are continuing to offer services and connect with people in that way. It's not a precondition though. And we know that people can get well, work on recovery, work on getting healthier more successfully when they're in that safe housing. So again, the trauma-informed care training requirement, everyone who's doing the coordinated entry system is trained in what we call trauma-informed care. And that is because we know that trauma is really prevalent, as I said, and that it's a predictor of long-term residential instability. So, examples of trauma that we think about are people who are survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault or human trafficking, but, also veterans who might be experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. But trauma also comes into people's lives because of different traumatic events. So this could be the loss of a loved one, a health crisis, loss of a job. Different, events in a person's life, can create trauma and create these actual, health effects and changes in brain chemistry. So the coordinated entry system. The first step is we need to know the name and needs of our unhoused neighbors. And, this happens at the entry points. This is that process of doing the housing needs assessment, collecting the release of information, doing the standard intake. This is how we know who's experiencing homelessness in our community and what their needs are. And then step 2 is assisting them in preparing for permanent housing opportunities. And this is really collecting all the different documents that people need to be verified in our system. And these are the documents that are commonly needed, for housing opportunities. But for permanent supportive housing, we're often also verifying that people are disabled, or if they've been homeless longer, verifying that chronic homelessness. And then step 3 is referring clients to eligible housing opportunities. And this includes referring people to housing opportunities in our homeless system, but also different mainstream services. So, one thing that I would point out is our system is somewhat decentralized. We do make referrals to housing and different resources through coordinated entry, but also people are applying for housing, through the housing authorities, through different nonprofit housing providers, looking for rooms to rent on the private market. So, people are looking for all the different resources that are available in the community. We do want to empower clients to be part of this process as much as possible, to collect the different documents they need to verify eligibility. However, like I said, we know that sometimes that housing navigator, that outreach worker, case manager, helping to navigate the system is really key for making sure that all those documents are collected. And this is an illustration that just shows that coordinated entry process where people might access the system at different entry points. It could be a street outreach entry point, a physical access site, but then the assessment happens and people are navigated and connected to different housing and supports. We do really like to emphasize that coordinated entry is a process. We don't want to just jump to doing the assessment and the intake, but we do really want to have conversations with people, ask pre-screening questions to understand, is this somebody who's currently homeless? Can homelessness be prevented? Can we divert somebody from the homeless system? Is there another safe place they can go other than entering the homeless service system? Do they want to be served by a victim service provider? Are we going to connect with other emergency services? And only do the assessment if homelessness can't be prevented. They're not going to be diverted or served by a victim service provider. And then always, again, thinking about what referrals we can make, both to resources in the homeless system, but also other mainstream resources. And we do have physical access points that people can go to do the coordinated entry process. But a lot of our coordinated entry also happens through street outreach and even over the phone. COVID did really expand how we do intake. And so we continue to do some intake over the phone. We have what's called the diversion hotline, and we have a number in English and Spanish that people can call to either enter into the coordinated entry system or to identify where they are in that system. I mentioned that we use the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, for how we collect our data. And we do collect releases of information from people. And we do have safety and security plans for how data is maintained in our system. And what coordinated entry, has really done, and it was interesting talking to somebody from another community, is we've created a more open HMIS system. We're able to share information more between providers. So we used to have a much more closed system. So an outreach worker doesn't really know if a client was enrolled, even with a rapid rehousing provider or a maybe other type of provider. But now we have the ability to see more of who's working with who, so we can better coordinate. We do a lot of coordinated case conferencing, and we do specialty case conferencing also around veterans, around families, and around youth. So our website, countyofsb.org, we have our resources on the homeless assistance portion of the website. And some of the key links that our providers use are resources for providers and training for providers page. My email is there, and I'm also happy to open it up now to questions. And, like I said, Goleta specific questions are certainly welcome.
Emily, can you talk about specific to Goleta, I guess, that process for how we're prioritizing individuals?
Yeah, definitely. So every coordinated entry system does have to have policies and procedures around how they prioritize people for different housing interventions. And Um, One of our main housing interventions is what we call permanent supportive housing. That's housing that's affordable, has supportive services, a lease. So that's permanent supportive housing. We also have what's called rapid rehousing, and people are prioritized for that also. It's a more short-term, typically intervention that still has case management and rental assistance, but is not intended to be indefinite. And so the way we prioritize people for those two key housing interventions is we do the housing needs assessment. That assessment, we're currently using what's called the Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. And that does give us a score. But we also look at number of disabilities people have. So chronic homelessness, so length of time and disability. And we secondarily sort that by months homeless. And so that's how people are prioritized either for permanent supportive housing or for rapid rehousing. But then among that group of people who are prioritized for permanent supportive housing, we, as I mentioned, have to verify people in order to match and refer them to a housing intervention. So we're working with providers to make sure that they've collected things like, a government issued ID, social security card. But for permanent supportive housing, we often have to also verify, disability or sometimes chronic homelessness. So the providers are collecting that information and then verifying them in that homeless management information system. And for the special projects, we do have a preference for housing people in their service prioritization area, their geographic area. So then we're also looking at, in addition to eligibility, that suitability of people who, are connected to that area, receiving services in that area. Any questions about that or anything else really? I think I see a hand, Judy. Yeah.
The charts and the organization and all sounds really wonderful. However, I'm frustrated with some homeless people that have been homeless for years and years, who fall through the cracks. They're mentally ill, but maybe don't seem like it. But what's going on inside of them. But not alcohol problem or substance abuse problem, not veterans, etc. They fall through all the cracks. And I don't know how to fill in the cracks and help these people.
I mean, there are more people with needs than we have, resources to refer people to. So that is an issue. Coordinated entry systems in part exist because it is a type of triage of, with limited resources. How do we prioritize people who need those resources the most, who need the resources to end their homelessness? But coordinated entry also, and we saw this, when we had additional resources, particularly during COVID, is still that system that can be used to pair people and match people to as best as we can to the resource that we think they need to be, to sustain housing, so that we're not matching somebody who needs, a lighter touch to a resource that is a more intense touch. So
do they need to attempt suicide to get it?
No.
You get on the priority list because
nothing
else
of course
is helping.
not. Well, I mean, one thing is this new development in Goleta is going to be very helpful. I mean, having a permanent supportive housing that we can refer to in a geographic area is very helpful, because we've seen time and time again that there are some people that won't leave a geographic area. So I think that will be helpful for sure. The way we do prioritize people is if people, with more disabilities, we prioritize for permanent supportive housing. people with fewer disabilities, we do prioritize for rapid rehousing. One thing, so lack of resources is an issue. The other issue that you mentioned is some people who have very high needs that you're seeing, high mental health needs that you're seeing not, being helped. And we do, in our coordinated outreach meetings, and I know Goleta has a meeting regularly, we do case conference around people who have high levels of needs. And, sometimes it can be difficult with voluntary services, to help people. We do want to keep bringing those people to the attention of, people like Chuck and me, though, so that we can, keep working to advocate for them. Chuck, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you're saying, Emily, by stressing what else is going on. So coordinated entry is the pipeline. The way to get people into the pipeline is through outreach. And so, and Judy knows this well because she's actually a lay outreach person who does a lot of outreach on her own. The trick with folks is regularly reminding them of the resources. And so, Judy, in the case of the very difficult that you're mentioning, people who are struggling with mental health issues, one of the biggest things that we try to do is encourage them over and over again to seek services. And we have a team from CityNet, we have a team, they're all here at this meeting. We have a team from CityNet, a team from Good Samaritan, a team from the United Way AmeriCorps program. There's mental health outreach. There's the co-response team, which involves both the sheriff and behavioral wellness staff. We have Deputy Sandu, who's doing a significant amount of outreach on his own. And so to some extent, it's reminding people over and over again that we're here for them. And it may take time, but eventually people do seek services and do get housed. That's why we're here. That's what we do.
Thank you.
Gary, you had your hand up for a second.
Hello, yeah, I did. He kind of got to the gist of my question. My question was about how do people come in contact with y'all to get services, and whether or not there was groups going out. But he kind of answered that part of the question for me. But I guess I was just curious, and in a law enforcement capacity, is there some way for us to connect people with services?
So
Yeah,
yes,
I
yes,
mean,
and yes.
yeah.
Go
ahead.
I'll put it into Gary, are you able to, if I put a document in the chat, are you able to download it? We actually have a resource guide for Goleta that everybody here is open to download and print for themselves or put on their phones. It's a step-by-step how-to to connect people with services. And that includes contacting law enforcement. In fact, law enforcement is often the first line of defense when people's properties are being impacted by homeless people. If you don't know Deputy Sandu, Officer Gasson, not Sandu, I'm sorry, Deputy Rausch. That's the way we're interfacing, with the kind of first responders is through Deputy Rausch.
Great, thank you for that. I apologize. I'm kind of new to the program. It's my first time here, but I work for UCSB Police Department. I'm actually Deputy Rausch kind of counterpart, but represent UCSB, of course. So I do work with foot patrol and stuff, and so I was curious to see kind of what was going on in the meeting and to get some information and see how we can also work collaboratively for homeless people out here. I appreciate that.
We do have the, physical access points by city. So in Isla Vista on Fridays at 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. at the community room, people can go to connect. And then people can also call the diversion line. So this is, for that client or that person who's seeking services. As Chuck mentioned, I think, outreach, proactively connecting with people who might not yet be requesting services would be the other way.
Got it.
Where is that Friday, 12:30 to 3:30? Where is that?
That's at the Isla Vista community room.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I can also put my email in the chat box for any of the information you send. I may not be able to download it from the chat, but if you wouldn't mind emailing that to me, Chuck, I'd appreciate it. And if anyone has questions or references for me, I'll, by all means, please copy and paste and send it to me. I'd appreciate it.
And Gary, and if, because you're at UCSB, if you are starting to see an uptick of individuals on your campus or in that general area, we do meet weekly with the city of Goleta and outreach providers. So you could probably join us during those calls to just bring those areas of concern, and then outreach is on the call, so then they can work with you to support that area.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Hey, Catherine and Chuck, just to fill in, I just emailed Gary that attachment, and then also Catherine and Landon, I added Gary's email to you guys so that you can add him to the weekly wrap meeting so you can kind of be looped in, because I know UCSB areas are constantly coming up with issues that we have. So I think he'd be a good resource to have on our weekly meetings as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Randy,
Thanks,
your
Aaron.
hand is up.
Oh, hello. I was wondering if there is a waiting list. I'd heard there was a waiting list already for Buena Tierra or Super 8, whenever that opened. And is there any way to find out if someone is homeless is on that list or not? Or
There's not yet a list. There's a pool of people that we're starting to identify that have that geographic connection to Goleta and Isla Vista and the unincorporated area. And then we're looking at, have they been verified yet? How are they prioritized? So I think, Chuck, not to give it to you, but right now I'm working closely with you and also, of course, CityNet and Good Samaritan to work on making sure that folks are in that pool of people. So I would say, and Catherine, of course, too. So I think you could bring names to any of those teams or people, and we could make sure that they're in that pool, that they're properly prioritized, that they're verified.
okay, great, thank you.
And this is John, and to answer Randy's questions others might have, early fall is when we're kind of guesstimating that an actual waiting list, because we'll be getting referrals from coordinated entry, but we also have transition age youth units set aside for them. We have units set aside for cottages recuperative care program as well. So we'll be establishing those actual waiting lists, working with the coordinated entry system and all the partners here on the Zoom. Early fall is when I think we'll actually start identifying specific names on the list.
Great, thank you.
We found from doing this in other regions, it's good to start working early because it is a process. But one thing about, coordinated entry is it's not a first come, first serve system, so, if somebody is assessed, maybe they've even been in the area a long time, but they've never completed the housing needs assessment, and outreach workers are building trust and rapport with them. They're able to do that. If they have, they've been homeless a long time, we verify chronic homelessness, if they have disabling conditions, if they're in that geographic area, they might be highly prioritized.
Paul Medell indicated that he has to leave. Paul, I don't want to put you on the spot, and if you would rather defer to me to talk about this, you can. But we've had quite a few resident concerns about encampments in a kind of more urban setting, particularly in Old Town. And I know that the Public Works Department has done some work around that. I don't know whether you want to report on that at all.
Are you talking about under the 217, Chuck? Is that
yeah? And also at the city-owned Mission Auto Leasing site.
Correct. So and Jaime and Deputy Roush may be able to elaborate a little bit more on this in terms of having our hands tied in regards to working with people as opposed to just trying to kick them out and do things like that's what we're here for. We're trying to work with them. We're trying to provide them opportunity. So Jaime, you guys may be able to elaborate a little more on this. We are aware of the situation, but and we're working with these individuals as you are, Chuck, to try and provide them the housing, and we talk to them, and they do return because, you know, they have mental issues. It's not always just cut and dry. Everybody has their own individual issue out there. And if it was easy, you know, we'd have an answer for everything. But Jaime, I don't know if you're still there, or Deputy Roush, maybe you can elaborate on this and what we're trying to do out there.
Yeah, I mean, I can try. Essentially, the city's policies are really aimed at trying to deliver service first, multiple times, over and over, kind of not taking up for an answer, right? But that can only go so far. Really, what's happened in the past has been essentially reminding someone so many times that they either ultimately take services, or they decide they'll just move, right? And they'll go somewhere else to not be bothered. It's not the best outcome, but it's sometimes what will occur. The problem though is, you know, people tend to like being in certain areas. So people in Goleta tend to stay in Goleta. And so it's just kind of this moving people around, unless and until the outreach part of it actually really sinks in. And so I don't know what the right answer is. We haven't figured it out. If we did, we'd point it and sell it to every city and jurisdiction out there. But we are definitely not the punitive, you know, lead hard with law enforcement, and just, but we have to be in the business of people. And sometimes the community doesn't like that it takes that long. Sometimes they want people just not to be present on the streets, and we can understand that. But it's just not acceptable for us to go around and use the sheriff's office to, you know, push people around and try to get them arrested, or make their lives difficult. And also our public works folks, I mean, their top priority is keeping the road systems safe and accessible. And so, you know, sometimes that's not the main priority of moving somebody who, you know, it's maybe unsightly, but it's not necessarily causing a problem. And so it's a difficult balance, and we don't have the right answer. We've been trying to use the same tactics and trying to adjust them. But we're also really tied by the legal system and what that allows us to really do. There's no crime against being homeless. There's no law against sitting on the street and having your stuff there. There are some different rules about, you know, setting up an encampment or blocking things. But other than that, I mean, the legal system really is intended to not criminalize people for being homeless.
Yeah, if I could piggyback off that, well put, Jaime. I've had the opportunity of working with homeless for quite a while in another city as well. And this goes back to the gal that lives under 217. What you find a lot of times, and Chuck, you know this is where they feel comfortable. This is where they feel safe. For some reason, this feels like their spot to them. And to uproot them from their spots is difficult mentally for them to move on. This is their safe place. And you'll find that in a lot of people that I've dealt with. They'll return to that same spot, so for whatever it's worth.
And then lastly, I'll just add that every time, you know, I don't want to say forcibly remove, but that we regularly try to move folks. You know, that's just it could be another issue of trauma, right? You're forcing someone to move from where they've set up. So it sounds like my mic's not doing so hot, so I apologize for that. But really, it's just the issue becomes how delicate we deal with folks because they're people.
And then I know we, you know, kind of transitioned quickly from CES to encampments because Paul needs to step off the call soon, but thank you, Paul. If there are, you know, still any questions or thoughts for Emily regarding CES and that process, feel free to, you can still jump in or raise your hand if there is any other questions or comments.
I guess I want to be really perfectly clear about it from a Goleta standpoint. Emily, is Goleta going to get a preference through CES for Buena Tierra? So I know that our city council have said publicly, members of our city council, that they really want to see Goleta residents in that project. Is CES, will that be supported by the CES system?
I mean, my understanding is that what we're doing is we're looking at the geographic area and creating that pool. And so it includes Goleta, but it also includes, you know, some of the unincorporated area too. So we're looking slightly more broadly than just the city of Goleta, but we are looking at that geographic area.
And then I would add to that for people who are curious, as part of the outreach that people have been talking about, I'm meeting weekly with the outreach teams, and we are creating a list of people that we think would be eligible. It's going to, you know, they have to go through a process in order to get placed. But we have a shelter outside of the city limits called Hedges House of Hope, which is in Isla Vista. And Good Samaritan runs that program. They've been very good about getting people document ready, which fits with what Emily's talking about, getting all the documents in place so that people can then move. Once the project is open, they're well positioned to quickly move into that site. So the system is starting to really work in terms of anticipating the opportunities and then moving people forward.
Yeah, just to sort of piggyback on that, what I've seen definitely is, because I've been involved with coordinated entry since it started, is that with increased resources, I think really good things do happen in the system. There's more movement, you know, there's more incentive, you know, for the providers to make sure that people are, you know, verified and correctly prioritized when there is a resource. So, you know, very grateful to have a permanent supportive housing resource in this area.
I did receive a message in the chat from Randy. He had a question, and so I want to give him the opportunity, not specific to CES, but going back to encampment response.
Hey, thank you. I just, for those of you, I've met a lot of you on the call, but I, director of facilities of a software and technology company in the city of Goleta, specifically in the Castilian Business Technology Park. And while I know this meeting happens every month, I'm not too sure what the next date is for April, but our organization we offer a thing called Give Back, and all of our employees get some volunteer hours in which you can choose what you'd like to do with it. And next month being Earth Day, we're going to do a few folks, especially those on my direct team, wanted to do some cleanup, if you will. And there's some what appears to be abandoned encampments right off of the Los Carneros off ramp on the southbound side, right near our office, not too far, I should say. It's, you know, and we wanted to get a group of people together to come and clean up. We've recently partnered with Earthcomb. I've brought Andrew into this meeting once or twice before, but he couldn't make today's call. But at any rate, he was going to work with my team to do it, you know, safely and clean up and dispose of. But I didn't know if this is the right forum to ask that question and or who I need to work with. I know it's, you know, it's kind of off the 101 there. There's a little area where we could pull our vehicle off the freeway so it's safe. But I didn't know if that was an opportunity and wanted to see who I could talk to about that.
I think there's a couple of people I know, you know, Chuck would definitely be one of them in terms of the 101 corridor. I think that could also be Lucille. She's also with the
maybe should answer that question directly. When you're dealing with, sometimes, Randy, I've learned, and I shouldn't maybe say this publicly, but sometimes it's better not to ask permission from public entities about things like this because of, you know, it may not be allowed for people to do what you just suggested. But Lucille I think Lucille could probably give you a more appropriate answer.
Sure. So if it's public land, then we if there are active encampments, we are guided by Boise and Grants Pass and other Ninth Circuit or other court decisions. So if it's public land, we can't displace anybody. If it's abandoned sites, I always recommend connecting with an organization that has, or an agency that has different types of certifications for cleanup if they're concerned about hazardous waste, biohazard, needles, anything like that. And the county is contracted with Quick Response, and we've worked with Andrew, myself, Caltrans, the cities have all sent him kind of the list of different certifications that are required for transporting and disposing of any sort of hazardous waste. And I know he's well on his way to getting there. But I also recommend connecting with Channel Keeper. They do cleanups regularly, and they let us know if there are concerns about needles or hazardous waste. And then we can send Quick Response out to remove that. That way you're not putting any volunteers at risk. But we're still notified so we can clean it up. And I know there's probably been quite a bit of change over the past couple of weeks with all of the new storms. And I think Chuck and I are planning to walk the area later this week, just to make sure that we're redeploying Quick Response out following this week's storms too. So just if you just want to make sure that you're being careful and cautious, if there are concerns about whatever kind of waste is being removed, and certainly Earthcomb, Heal the Ocean, and Channel Keeper are all aware of those precautions to take as well. Did that really answer your question? I'm not sure.
Well, yes, it did. Thank you for that. I just want to ensure, I don't know that if it's public or private land, it's right off the 101. So I just want to, I don't want to do something that we're not supposed to be doing. So I don't know, is there a resource or somewhere I can look to verify that it's
I can check the parcels. It may be on Caltrans land. And you said it's on the mountainside of the 101?
No, southbound, more kind of in between the rail and the freeway.
So Union Pacific is actually going to remove a lot of waste over the next couple of weeks in that area. So it may already be cleaned up by the time you're planning to do that. And we just did a couple of cleanups in between storms. Chuck, was that in March or February? I can't remember. But we had Quick Response go out and remove quite a bit. So I think it would probably, CHP is typically going out with Caltrans. Union Pacific Police is typically going out with Union Pacific, and they'll be out beginning next week. I think they posted last week. So it depends on exactly where, but I'll put my email in the chat, and if you can send me again the exact location, I'll check on whoever sees it.
I think my recommendation, Rennie, and Lucille's being typically modest, but she's in charge of that area. That's part of a statewide grant that we received to do encampment work and cleanups in that area. And so part of the reason why I wanted you to coordinate is that, as she's intimating, there's circumstances where some of these might already be targeted for cleaning up. But if your folks are aware of places that maybe aren't, so that's where you really want to coordinate with her. And so I recommend connecting with her offline to facilitate that. Okay, cool. I also want to mention the San Jose River. That's the creek, that whole area we're now referring to as the San Jose complex, because of the number of people that are living there that sort of use different parts along that whole creek stretch for different activities. I mean, I've seen art studios, I've seen kind of hangout spots, and so we're working, the outreach teams are taking that area, working it very intensely. Lucille and I are going to do a kind of a mapping project to kind of get a sense of where we are in all of this week. And we'll continue to report here at this meeting about the hot spots. And so the San Jose Creek is definitely one that we're focusing on. Another, before we have to leave, just so people know, is the Glen Annie off-ramp. It's another area where there's a fairly high concentration of people. Most people are aware of it. I mean, and by people, I mean all the outreach folks are aware, law enforcement is aware. We're trying to work with the people that are living there to get them to think about alternatives. And so that's a complicated site, but that's one we're working on as well. There's a question from Taylor Horn.
Hey guys, just trying to, I'm Taylor Horn from Justice Assets, Asset Management. We own a bunch of commercial properties out in the Goleta area. I mean, you guys are saying that area. I'm just curious, because we're talking about Los Caneros, but then you're also talking Glen Annie. Are we talking about the whole stretch in between those, or just those particular areas?
Yeah, so the grant that Lucille and the county received, and Goleta's partnering closely with them, is the entire Caltrans and UPRR corridor that stretches from Winchester pretty much, to Fairview and maybe even Patterson. There's a team of CityNet there. Sal Hernandez is here, and there's a team from CityNet that is focused. They're contracting with the county to go through that area. We are, Goleta's got our own team. So you have Ellen, who's sitting next to Sal. she's working with us on working that corridor. So the really good news, Taylor, is that we actually know pretty much everyone living in that region. And so now it's a process of talking to them on a regular basis, getting them to hopefully agree to relocating and working with us to go to a different place. Once they're out of there, then Lucille can bring her teams to clean that area up thoroughly. And an example of how this has really worked is the site that we used to call the trash pile that was near the railroad depot. This was a huge trash pile, and basically one guy lived there. CityNet was able to get him housed, and then we were able to completely clear that site. So that's an example of the success of the kind of work that we're going to be doing, over the next months.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've already seen a lot of progress happening. I've seen you specifically out there cleaning up some trash and some different items, so I very much appreciate it. I just wanted to clarify that we're talking about that whole corridor.
Thank you, Taylor. That's right.
And I might make a fool of myself right now, but I didn't know there was going to be this UPRR clearing. I just saw an email, and so this, and maybe Lucille and others knew about this for months in advance or weeks in advance. But sometimes I feel what happens is, we won't hear anything for a while, then all of a sudden they're like, "We're coming next week," and it's panic mode and trying to figure it out. And so I think part of the frustration, we feel it from our side is, as much as we try to coordinate and make sure we're working well together, some of the bigger agencies, frankly, are just doing what they can and what they want when they want to do it, and not that they're purposely not trying to play nice, but it's hard to have a strategy and then all of a sudden you see giant clearings happening, and then you didn't know they were going to happen, and people start asking like, well, I guess they're doing it, and so it makes it hard, especially for outreach, if they don't know ahead of time that big swaths of lanes are going to get cleared. Like last Friday, Caltrans was doing a huge clearing off the exit off of Patterson, so they closed that off ramp, and they had, I don't know, six giant trucks and equipment out there all day. And at the end, it's great. I mean, the place got cleaned up, but if there was any people down there, I'm not sure much notice was given. But maybe somebody else has a different perspective. But that's kind of another frustration is, we're trying to work with each other, and then all of a sudden something happens and we're kind of more in react mode.
And to make this easier on you guys, I don't know if there's a specific person, because we're the largest commercial property owners in all of the Goleta area. I don't know if there's a list that I can get to somebody of our properties, because during COVID, basically we put fencing around the majority of our properties that don't allow people to get from their Union Pacific Railway into our properties. And so we've added high security gates to all those, so I can get access codes to those if somebody needs for access.
We would love that. So if you can, my email is cflax@cityofgoleta.org.
Yeah, I have your email.
Okay, great.
I'll send it to you. I just didn't know who to send it to.
Yeah.
Who is the person, or one of you here, the one I've lost track, who has been trying to organize Goleta city volunteers for trash cleanup? We've been doing it for years on our own, out of our own pocket, and paying homeless people, etc. But I would like to contact that person, and I can't remember which person it is.
I believe that was Randy Brown that originally was just asking that question, if that's what you meant.
I don't think he was.
No, the city. No, I'm talking.
With the city.
Oh,
okay.
Person that employed by the city of Goleta.
I think that was Melissa Nelson. She's been doing these cleanups. Melissa Nelson.
And I can't hear you very well. It's not coming through.
Nelson, Judy, I can email you her email.
Okay, thank you. it was a man that I talked with, but offered to help buy us grabber sticks and stuff like that.
All right. Well, we're at the 10 o'clock mark. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate all the questions and the conversation. Our next meeting will take place on April 24th. You'll be receiving an email reminder with the Zoom link. As always, feel free to share with anyone who might be interested, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.